Okay, let's open in a word of prayer. Lord, thank you very much for this day. We pray that you will bless our time together today as we try to make some sense of the things that are going on in light of Bible prophecy. Bless our time together in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, this is my graphic for today. The pieces don't fit. This is a very difficult time to be alive. I did a prophecy conference and some panels when I was in Las Vegas last weekend. And it's so interesting when we get all of the prophecy conference speakers together, we don't agree on a lot of stuff. And, eventually they'll all agree we'll all agree, but right now we're sort of in that, I don't know if I could call it the era of righteous speculation. Some things and it's so interesting when I talk about something or we do a roundtable, immediately people will say something like, well, you didn't talk about this. And it's like, the round table was almost 3 hours long. It's not possible to talk about everything in every time we get together. So there may be some gaps here today. That's not by design. It's just because there's not enough time. But it is a very difficult time to figure out where does this events that are going on in the Middle East, where does that fit in terms of Bible prophecy? So I thought this was a pretty good graphic for that. I found another graphic. By the way, I don't use AI very often to generate graphics. That should be obvious because they look homemade, maybe. But I'm seeing these really pretty good graphics all over the Bible prophecy blogs and Facebook groups and that type of thing. And they're pretty good, except when their order is wrong. Then it kind of messes up the niceness of the neat, nice things that they've put together. But I found this one. I thought this was kind of a good graphic. Maybe I could just do little circles to highlight what's going on. A guy standing and looking over the Middle East, and it does seem like the Middle East and other parts of the world on fire. There are a lot of wars, a lot of rumors of wars. That's to be expected. I do think that something is going on. I will talk a little bit about this later. Daniel chapter 8, the ram, which represents Persia, and the goat that I think is Turkey, that grows this prominent horn. We'll see how that works out. A lot of people don't agree with me on that. How do I know that? Because nobody else seems to talk about it when I go to a prophecy conference. I'm a Turkey guy, and I'm not. And other people say Russia's the most prominent thing. Russia, 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 Russia. I don't know that that's true. I'll be honest with you. It may. By the way, in Ezekiel 38, it says that when these nations come, clearly a number of the descriptors, I believe Ezekiel was writing about the region that he saw these people, armies coming from these different regions, not from where the people ended up. If we start tracing the ethnicity, it's the whole world, right? Because there's been a lot of migration in human history. So I think Ezekiel was using the term Magog, Togarmah, Meshach, Tubal, in Jovan's and other passages, to represent the area that he thought the people were coming from at the end times. It may not be that, these people aren't the people of Magog, they moved to Korea or someplace like that. And the name sometimes went with it. By the way, you can find on Google a very interesting map. A friend of mine pointed it out to me. A map of Korea, older map, on Google or in Wikipedia or someplace, and the name of the Korean peninsula is Goguryeo. Goguryeo. Like Gog or Rhea? Don't know. I'm just saying that's, and you can find these things, but then it gets very tricky. Like, does that mean North Korea is going to be Gog of Magog? I don't think so. But I think the regions of the north that Ezekiel saw, he described. And so the question is, Magog, is it Russia or not Russia. And by the way, go look at all the different Bible maps that have been put together over the years. I believe most of them put Magog in Russia. Or, I'm sorry, not in Russia, in modern day Turkey. And for some reason people are really, I don't know, they get a little bit angry about it. But I'm not saying that Russia's not involved, by the way, because it says these people come led by these nations and many peoples with them. So maybe Russia's in that group. But then we also have the problem of demographics and being involved in wars and not doing very involved in wars. And Russia, let's be honest, Russia has not done that well in Ukraine. You remember all the pro-Russian people on the internet, you know their names. They were all out there, oh, this is over in 3 days, 2 weeks, 3 months, 4 months, a year and a half, and now we're 4 years and 1 month and 5 days. Still hasn't happened yet. It's still going on. And now with what's going on in Iran, it makes it a little bit more pronounced. And then also want you to take special note when you're reading through, particularly like Ezekiel, there is this phrase that keeps popping out of the scripture. Talks about prophecy and things are going to be filled. And then it says, and then they will know. So you see this sequence of events like Ezekiel 35, talks about Mount Seir, Ezekiel 36, coming back in unbelief, 37, the dry bones coming together, Ezekiel 38, 39. And there's a couple phrases that appear near the end of those passages or within those passages, then they will know. And then they also say, and the nations will know. And so then the question is, okay, so when do these events happen that result in that? Then they will know, or then the nations will know. And that's an area of some controversy. So that's why some of us put Ezekiel 38 near the end. Others put it near the beginning. But then my challenge to them is, okay, so is the then they will know, is that postponed? And then we get into, that's why we have panels. So today what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about some cultural things that I think are very significant that are happening that indicate a real, I don't know how else to describe it other than a cultural apostasy, falling away from common sense and that type of thing. Then I'm going to talk about Iran, Iraq. So let's talk about the cultural things that are happening first. You're seeing this, I'll talk about this more at the end. So on campuses at CPAC was this week in America, conservatives are not getting along. And conservative groups that we maybe used to kind of like a little bit are doing things that just don't make any sense to us, like who they're inviting to speak, who they're platforming, and that type of thing. And at some point, you just have to, it's your conscience will be your guide, I think, on this. But for a number of them, it's like, I don't want anything to do with them. I'm concerned with where they're going. And then we're in the midst of this massive propaganda operation. Now, I've made reference to a blog, X account named Insurrection Barbie. I love the name of that blog. Her handle is @Defiantly Free, claims to be an evangelical Christian, and she's posting some really good things. I don't know how she or they are doing it because they're very long posts, they're well-researched, they're well-documented, and they're really, from my own personal research and things I've said over the years, they're absolutely spot on. People will come out and say, you can't listen to her, she's a convicted felon or something. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think that's been proven. But immediately somebody said, well, you can't listen to her, she's a convicted felon. Well, one, you don't know whether that's true. And two, you understand that maybe that's being said to get you to ignore what she said because what she said is so correct. Maybe you're falling for a propaganda op, and there's propaganda going on everywhere in many ways. So here's, this is something that's been done This has been going on for about 7, 8, 9 years. Pavi Rasanen, and I apologize, I don't speak Finnish as any one of the one languages that I speak. She is a member of parliament. Finland, she's in Finland, still a thing, married, family, that type of thing. She wrote a pamphlet a number of years ago, and then probably about 2000, she wrote it in 2004, then referenced it in a tweet about 2009, and she was brought up on charges by the authorities in Finland. She went through a lower court, found not guilty. She was charged under aspects of the Finnish law that relates to terrorism and something like, I forget what the other aspect of it is. So lower court, she was found not guilty. The prosecutor, which has been after her now for, 2009 to this year, that would be 16 years, say 18 years. It's unbelievable. Then they went to appeal. She and the Lutheran bishop that she was charged with won on appeal. So the prosecutor appealed it to the Finnish Supreme Court, and this week in a 3-2 decision, a split decision, the Finnish Supreme Court said, well, your tweet wasn't hateful, but your pamphlet that you did back in 2004, this is a picture of it. I sort of blurred it out a little bit. You can kind of, it's Adam and Eve in the garden. And it's based on scripture. She wrote it because she was opposed to recognition of homosexuality and homosexual marriage. She was opposed to that. She wrote that in 2004. The law under which she was convicted this week by the Supreme Court of Finland didn't even exist when she wrote the pamphlet. Now, this is very concerning because it's going to, this is a can of worms legally. It's really called an ex post facto law. So you do something, then somebody decides, well, we don't like that, so they make a law outlawing what you did. We don't allow that in the United States as a general rule, although some of that is changing. In fact, there's a recent Supreme Court decision about that that's way too it involves a case I worked on for many years, but they enacted an enhanced penalty on financial forfeiture. The courts then went back to people who had been ordered to forfeit things, and they tried to enhance the period of time, lengthen the period of time through which their financial forfeiture would apply. And the Supreme Court said back in January, no, you can't do that. That's not allowed. That's ex post facto. You're enacting it after the fact. We don't allow that in this country. You can enact a law for something going forward, but not looking back. So she's convicted of this. Here's a little bit of an article about this. Alliance Defending Freedom, I think had worked with her. And this X tweet on the left side of the page says she was unanimously acquitted for her Bible tweet, but convicted of hate speech for a over 20-year-old church pamphlet that she had co-authored. The conviction is under the War Crimes and Crimes Against Humanity section of Finland's criminal code. So somebody who stood up for what the Bible says about marriage and how it's supposed to operate biblically was convicted under code sections. The law falls under War Crimes and Crimes Against Humanity. Veteran Christian Democrat politician Pavi Rasanen has been found guilty of incitement against an ethnic group. The Supreme Court ruled on Thursday by a 3-2 vote. Lower courts have acquitted her. The public prosecutor's office has been pursuing the case against her, a member of Parliament and former head of the Christian Democrats, all the way to the highest court in Finland. Piven commented on the verdict shortly after it was handed down to her before considering whether to appeal at European level. How do you think that's going to go with those lunatics at the EU? She intends to read the dissenting opinions. The verdict was handed down by a narrow majority. She's been acquitted to lower courts. According to the Supreme Court, Roussinen has been guilty of incitement against a group of people in a pamphlet entitled, now I want you, please hold on to your seats. I don't want you to fall over when you hear the title of the pamphlet. It's in Finnish. The title of the pamphlet is, He Created Them Male and Female. Homosexual relationships challenge the Christian view of humanity. Now, I know some of you are probably emotionally, psychologically reeling from hearing that, but that's the title of the pamphlet. She's going to be fined 1,800 euros. A representative and board member of the Luther Foundation is also sentenced to 21-day fine, 1,100 euros. The Luther Foundation, which published the pamphlet, is sentenced to a corporate fine of 5,000 euros. The charges did not apply when the publication was published, but when it was published on the internet. But when it was wrote and published and distributed, there was no law about this. I am shocked, she says. That's the title of the headline there. I am shocked, adding that she had expected something completely different. I can already say on a standing basis that I'm seriously considering appealing this to the European Court of Human Rights. But understand, this is all part of a big piece because the European Union has enacted these hate speech laws as well. And the European, I think it's called the Digital Services Act, they do this and they say, okay, X, Meta, whatever the big social media companies are, Instagram, if we find something offensive, you have to take it down immediately. Now, what happens by that? What the Europeans think, what the Europeans determine, because it's not based on rational thought, what the Europeans determine gets put through social media to everybody all over the world. And so it becomes a very Orwellian thing. I live in America, but I can have my X post taken down because, well, X doesn't want to say, well, you did that in America, but not Europe. And then we have to try to block people from seeing that in Europe. And it's a real mess. And the Europeans did this because they want to control what you think, even though you may never visit there. And you probably should think about ever visiting there because of the way they are going about things. I didn't have a chance to translate the speech, but Merz, who is I think he's Prime Minister of Germany. He was speaking in the German parliament this week, and he set the heads on fire of a lot of people in the German parliament because he said, hey, we seem to have a problem with women being sexually assaulted and raped. And it appears that a very high percentage, or a very, very high percentage of those assaults and rapes are committed by immigrants. Well, you can imagine what the lefties in the European Parliament did. Their head was on fire, they were melting down, and they're going after the prime minister who made he was just stating a factual fact. I have friends in the UK. I know people in the UK are being arrested by the thousands for posting something on social media that offends somebody. But they can go down the street, the group that's offended, and they can say, death to all Jews and that type of thing, from the river to the sea, and that's okay. I saw another post. Remember the lady who was, she was standing silently outside an abortion clinic. And they came up and they arrested her, and they said, what are you doing? She said, I'm standing here. And they said, are you praying under your breath? Are you thinking about you don't like what's going on in there? And you're offending those people just by standing there. And I'm seeing more and more of those cases in the UK. And so in Canada, they have passed in the parliament the lower house, I don't know if it's called the House of Representatives, has passed a bill C9. It's been pending for a while. I've talked about it a number of times. It's an anti-hate bill. Now, this is where the people in Canada that are in charge of things, they view the book 1984 not as a horror story, but as a user manual. This is how they're going to conduct things. This is how you're supposed to act. So they will come out, this bill, and they'll say, well, this bill is fantastic. It provides for religious freedom. It protects you from, you're allowed to go to your place of worship and worship freely. But conservative groups in Canada, and it's now going up to the Senate, and it will probably pass and become the law of Canada, have said, no, wait a minute, we asked for religious exemption. If you're quoting from a passage of Scripture, you can't be charged under this hate crime law. And the liberals and lefties that are running Canada have said, no. You have freedom of religion, but you don't have freedom of religious expression. Well, if you don't have the latter, the former is kind of worthless because you have to be able to talk about your text. And so you're going to see a lot of problems in Canada, I fear, if this law is put in place. They could amend it. They could just put in, if you're quoting from a passage of Scripture, Quran or the Bible, you're okay. But no. And how many times do you think somebody who quotes from the Quran is going to be charged under that law? Probably. Is it possible to have less than zero? But Christians will be. There's just no doubt about it. And we see what they did back in the Charlie Vector days, as we've talked about. So the next thing I want to talk about is another thing that's happened. So here's a lady, 10 months ago, she was offered MAID, not a MAID, MAID, M-A-I-D, in Canada, and this is growing exponentially in its use. MAID means medical assistance in dying. And there is a push to extend this to, right now it has to be above 18, but they're talking about making it applicable to mature young people. Well, who's going to determine who's mature young people? It's going to be the lunatics who decide to euthanize somebody. That's who they have, like, these committees set up. These are doctors, medical doctors. I thought the Hippocratic Oath was first do no harm. It would seem to me that killing a person kind of meets the definition of doing harm. So this lady went in, she was sick 10 months ago, and she was offered MAID. I believe, if I remember the article correctly, she thought about it but decided no. So this is the front page of the National Post yesterday. A doctor offered MAID. She had other plans. And it says, Miriam Lancaster, on the day she was offered medically assisted suicide at a BC hospital, a picture below her. And to the right, that's her 10 months later on vacation in Guatemala riding a horse. I think she got over it. So here is a doctor in British Columbia. Her name is Ellen Wiebe, and she has enthusiastically euthanized. Say that 10 times real fast. Enthusiastically euthanized over 500 depressed and disabled people over the last 5 years. Watch this little clip of her in a documentary that was made, and tell me, somebody needs to do an intervention and get people away from this lunatic. By the way, she does the euthanization. She euthanizes people, kills them. She also runs this clinic in British Columbia called the Abortion Contraceptive Care Clinic. So you kind of know where she kind of likes taking life. Just watch this.
I love my job. This is the very best work I've ever done in the last 7 years. Doctors like grateful patients, and nobody is more grateful than my patients now.
One of my patients who booked her death, I came to see her. She was in the hospital, so I came to see her about 5 days before her booked death. And I said, just, wanting to know if you're still feeling the same as you was when we talked last. And she said, no, I've changed my mind. I was scared. I'm not scared anymore. I'm fine. And she actually died on the day she had booked her death.
Oh, okay. Okay. Does that seem weird to you? No, it doesn't. It seems evil and demonic. She would smile about that like she's doing a service to humanity, but this is growing in Canada, and there's pushes to bring it here to the places in the United States as well. It's so Canada's beautiful, great people, spoken there a number of times, loved it. Just, if I go back, just pray I don't get ill or unhappy. So there was this, and this is a problem too. There was a big case, don't have time to go into it. Social media companies were held liable in probably $75 million in a case involving people, Meta and it was Meta, and I can't remember the other one that was held liable for harm caused to people. And it was like $60, $75 million. I don't know if anybody's ever going to see any of that, but there are a lot of cases out there because there are things happening in social media, chatbots and that type of thing are convincing people to commit suicide. So be very careful with that. But to show you how far Europe has gone, I read the Financial Times of London. I find it's an important newspaper. But they have an editorial yesterday in the Financial Times. So they just lost a big case about AI chatbots causing harm, right? Now this guy comes in and says, could AI chatbots undo the harms of social media? Dude, no. That's what's causing the harms in social media. How can... Now, I suppose that he submitted this a couple days ago. It was published yesterday. In the interim, there's a massive jury verdict against the social media companies for just this kind of thing. And this doesn't make any sense. So the best thing you can say about him is very bad timing. Okay, make sure your editorial people publish your idiotic opinion before the facts on the ground change, which is what happened. Okay, China's robot revolution. This is going to become bigger and bigger. I think Tesla or Elon Musk company are talking about 1 million robots. And as populations die off, robots are going to be what helps you and feeds you because there won't be anybody left to take care of you. So in Japan, I mean, think of this, like 2 million or more people a year, their population goes down. They're just dying of old age or dying natural deaths. Nobody's killing them off. Population is decreasing by 2 million people a year in Japan. Equate that to where we live. Columbus has a metro population of about 2 million people. That would mean every year a city like Columbus would disappear. The buildings would be empty, the schools would be empty, the restaurants, everything would have to go away each year. And it's going to increase over time, and China's already well into this. And then there's an article here, is religion reviving or declining? This is in the New York Times editorial page this morning. And I think Ross Douthat says, yes, it is reviving and declining all at the same time. I think Barna came out with a new study about people's worldviews this week. In adults in America, about 4% of the people have a biblical worldview. So this came up last week at the conference. John Prescott from Australia was there, and he said he'd written a book that really had an impact on him. It was a guy who had a near-death experience and went to heaven. But the book that the guy wrote when he came back, I think, was called The 2% Rule. And what was his conclusion? About 2% of the people make it to heaven. So we think there's these massive revivals going on, and there's just not a lot of evidence of it when we do surveys. And then this guy, whether you agree with the premise of his book or not, the point is, maybe he's accurate. Maybe it's only 2% of everybody ever makes it to heaven because they don't have the proper belief system. And then you look at Barna and it's like, boy, this is really scary. Okay, now let's talk about the Middle East. I tried very hard to organize this in a nice, neat, logical fashion. And let me tell you, if I was diagramming this, AI would fail at diagramming how everything is fitting together because everything is interconnected. So you're going to hear some repetition over the next few minutes or so. I had a case once a guy had been a film producer. He was involved in a business dispute with my client. I said, well, what was your film about? And he said, 2 hours. It was about 2 hours. I thought it was a very clever answer. I've never been able to use that until today. So in the next I'll be done in about an hour. So here we go. So this is cover of Newsweek about a week ago. What's next for Iran? And what you see a cutout of Iran, you see Donald Trump there, and you're going to see all sorts. People hate Trump. They love Trump. He's wrong. Netanyahu's wrong. Netanyahu's right. It's very, very chaotic from a political standpoint. It's dividing the right in America. A lot of people hate the war. Young people really hate the war. I'm not going to go die for Israel. And you have people like Megyn Kelly talking about this. It's Israel's war. We have no business being there. She's doing it for clicks because she figures that by taking this position, this is the way to get people to watch my program. More people watch my program, better ad revenue, more money. I think that's what motivates her. And I don't think it seemed to work better when she was at Fox and they gave her a script. But now when she's on her own, it's just not really working that well. Occasionally she'll say, things that are interesting, but for the most part, she's pro Candace, pro Tucker, pro everything. And by the way, I'm going to give you a warning. I'm going to play a clip of Tucker in a little bit. So, and nobody, lock those doors. Nobody can leave because be sure they're not locked because I don't want you to run through the glass. But this is a problem. But you're seeing this. So, for example, this is a Democracy VDem Institute Democracy Report 2026. So what they do is they look at all of the countries in the world, which one are democracies, and then they divide those into liberal democracies and elected democracies. So the United States under Donald Trump is on the downtrend to where we're not going to be a democracy. This is shocking to me because so you can imagine the political orientation of these people. They're left-wing, and what the left-wing people do, it's a fundamental principle of life. They will always accuse you of what they do. So they say Trump is, shutting down elections and that type. No, he just wants the right people to vote in an election. It's very simple. And we've had government shutdowns and TSA and multi-hour, 8-hour long lines at some airports around the country. I was very lucky. The airports I flew through over the last couple weeks, nobody in line, ever. Now, I do have, TSA pre-check and another enhanced security check. And I will tell you, it's wonderful. It's probably worth the cost to do that because you don't have to stand in line trying to figure out what to do for 4, 5, 8 hours or whatever. Now, supposedly this is being taken care of. But this company, this group, VDIM Institute, says America is like one of the worst elected democracies in the world. And freedom is declining and that type of thing. And they have a graph that shows like certain constitutional freedoms that are going down. And it's like, we just went through that for like 12 of the last 16 years with the 3 Obama administrations that we had. Obama, and Obama 3, AKI, President Otto Penn. I hope you understand where I'm coming from on that. So here's so there's a lot going on. So how is the war in Iran going? And the answer is, it is. It's going well and it's going badly. And it's very hard to get information out of there. So I've tried to look through multiple sources, multiple viewpoints, and I still come to the conclusion, I'm not sure how it's going. I think it is, it's made a mess of a lot of things. I don't know how quickly that mess can be undone. It's going to have impacts. We've all seen the price of gas go up. But here's one. This is one that might be good. There was a picture that accompanied this on X. Pictures of massive traffic jam at the Iraq-Iran border, going from Iran into Iraq. And the caption said, displacement of tens of thousands of families of the Revolutionary Guard militias and their members toward Iraq with their personal weapons. And the other comment was, Trump inflicts the utmost degree of humiliation and degradation on the Revolutionary Guard. I will say, trying to look at this from an objective standpoint about what's being done by Israel and the United States and other people who say they want to join in, like the Gulf Coast Arab countries, but don't seem to have done it thus far, is that Israel and the United States have done a pretty good job in Iran. They have taken out hundreds and hundreds of missile launchers. They've destroyed underground storage facilities. They've decimated the Iranian Navy, except for maybe small, fast boats that could go out there and lay a mine or two, which is a big problem. And they are systematically destroying a number of levels of the religious and Iranian Revolutionary Guard and even parliament structure in Iran. Now, there are reports Trump was negotiating with the Speaker of the Iranian parliament, and then I saw some reports last night that that person may have been eliminated. And eventually they get to the place, I think, there's a problem. You would think that we will get to the place eventually where nobody will step up to run things because they're putting a target on their back. But the problem is these people are crazy lunatics. They believe in a eschatological, messianic, apocalyptic view of Islam, and they're fanatics about it. And the worse it gets for them, they think things are going well. It's impossible to deal with them. So whenever the president says, oh, we're close to a deal, look, I don't believe him. I don't believe you are, Mr. President. I know you think you are, and maybe you're trying to make us feel better about it. But we've been at this for 47 years with these people, and we know that this never, ever works. They never reach an agreement, and then they never keep the agreement that they reach. It's part of their religious belief system. It's okay to lie. And they do it on an epic scale. It is stunning to watch. So here's another, and I'll just go through these. Some of these will bounce back and forth. Iran risks renewed protests as citizens reach the breaking point amid a war-stricken economy. One of the things that they're doing is they're taking out these militias, the besieged militias and the leadership. So now what they're doing is they're setting up checkpoints internally in Iran in tunnels, because then they're not exposed to drone strikes. And what some people in Iran were doing, they would see a group of IRGC or besieged militia people congregating on the street, and they would go out there with their phone and a speaker and play the sound of a drone coming in, and these people would scatter because they know that their end is near when they hear that, but that's what they want, but they don't want it really. So, and now the question is, why aren't the people in the streets rising up? And the answer is, it's very difficult. They're not armed. A lot of them were killed. We've seen the Iranian reports out of Iran. For example, there was I don't know if you remember, a young lady who burned a poster of Khomeini as she was smoking a cigarette. She was executed this week, the regime announced. There was a wrestler, champion wrestler, had participated in international competition, 19 years old, he was hung. And so it's a brutal regime. And I do understand it, but it upsets me that all these people who run around about, a settler littered in Judea or Samaria, they dropped a paper cup or something, they have protest over this because they're destroying the environment, but then these people are being killed by the tens of thousands and nobody says anything. So Israel's been hitting the arms production. So what they've done is they've taken out the missile launchers, they've taken a lot of the missiles, but Iran has a very serious amount of defense production. So they've started hitting those plants. By corollary, this morning I saw pictures, just as I was coming to church, that Iranian missiles had landed in Israel near Beersheba and down in the Negev, and it hit factories. And they were on fire. So there's a lot of damage, a lot of back and forth. Some of the missiles get through. Iran has designed the missile. They come in at very high speed, almost vertical, hard for a rocket to go up and hit that. And then they have those cluster bombs at the end. So there's been a lot of damage, a lot of injuries in Israel. There was a missile about a week ago. It was shot down, but when they shoot it down, they just break it into pieces, and then the falling pieces can cause some damage. Even people have been killed. And one big piece with the warhead still intact hit near the Temple Mount. Caused a lot of damage, but I don't believe the warhead ever exploded. But it was just the force of the missile coming in at high speed with a lot of weight that caused the problem. And so as a result of that, I mentioned this first hour, so a little over a week ago, there was missile broke apart. Pieces of the missile debris was found on the Temple Mount. Some was found by the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So Israel, I think in a intelligent move, said, okay, we don't know where this stuff is going to land. It's not safe. We can't have, can you imagine if Israel shoots the missile, breaks it apart, and it lands on top of Muslims praying during Ramadan on the Temple Mount? What do you think is going to happen? Or if Israel hits the rocket and it hits the Dome of the Rock. I mean, if that missile that hit about 300 meters from Al-Aqsa had hit the Dome of the Rock or Al-Aqsa Mosque, there would have been a lot of damage and everything would have escalated. I'll talk a little bit about that later. So what do you do? So Israel said, Church of Holy Sepulchre, debris fell here. We're closing Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It's Holy Week. Today's Palm Sunday. Church of the Holy Sepulchre is closed, and I guarantee you when you go home, you will see oh, Israel's against Christians. But the Western Wall is closed. The Temple Mount is closed. So they're not discriminating against anybody. It's a public safety issue. If Iran wasn't shooting rockets and missiles and drones into Israel, wouldn't be a problem, right? But Israel tries to protect people, and they immediately twist it the other way. Now, these reports are coming out. This is from the Financial Times yesterday. IDF doubts the war will topple the regime. So there was a belief, we're going to take out the regime, the regime is going to fall, we're going to have people come in. I think that anybody who was saying this is going to happen in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months, 6 months was dreaming. It was not going to be that easy. It was going to be a long, protracted thing. And I'm seeing people that I respect, military, security analysts, saying this could take years. And that's really good news, right? We all wanted to hear that. And now there are reports coming that there's dispute between some elements of the IDF and President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Hey, this may not work. Airstrikes alone are not going to topple the regime. I think we all really knew that. I will say they're doing a tremendous job of trying to systematically dismantle the Iranian military and religious establishment to try to create a surrender. We can't fight this. And the question is, how are we doing? Saudi Arabian Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, this is in the New York Times and Washington Post the other day, he has said, President Trump, continue. Please move forward. But maybe it's not as good as that sounds, but he does seem to, remember, just shortly before the war, they were saying, hey, United States, don't you use our stuff, don't you use our military bases on our land and our territory. And then Iran started shooting missiles all over the place, into the UAE, into Bahrain, into Oman, who was trying to mediate a settlement, and then into Saudi Arabia. Because what's being done is there seems to be a concerted effort by Iran to decimate the Arab Gulf Coast countries' energy facilities. They hit a giant refinery in Bahrain. And by the way, Bahrain is majority, about 65% of the people in Bahrain are Shia Islamic people. The ruling family is Sunni, and there was reports that the Shia people were starting to rise up against the government, but maybe the opposite is happening. Now I'm seeing reports that the Shia and Sunnis in Bahrain are saying, hey, you stupid Iranians, you leave us alone. We don't want anything to do with you. This is, go fight your own war someplace else and leave us out of it. But they've destroyed really a lot of damage to a refinery. And when they talk about these refineries and facilities, there was an attack on Qatar, gas facilities in Qatar. And they're talking like it will take us years to rebuild this back. So you have facilities that process oil that are offline for a while. In Qatar, they have liquefied natural gas. Everything has to be cooled to 160 degrees below zero. But when the facility shuts down, everything warms up to room temperature or atmospheric temperature, and you got to cool the whole thing down to 165 degrees before you can start liquefying natural gas. And Qatar is the largest liquefied natural gas supplier on the planet. And some places, like Europe and other places, rely heavily on that gas. So when they don't have gas, what happens? Well, there's this cascade effect. Can't make fertilizer. You can't make certain components of fertilizer, so there might be a fertilizer shortage, and I may talk about that in a moment. Here's a report from Washington Post, I think, or Wall Street Journal. Trump tells advisor he wants the war over. I could see him saying that. I could see him calling people and said, "Why haven't you finished this thing yet?" And then there's always the back and forth. Oh, we got a deal. We're close. They're begging for a deal. And then more missiles are launched. So Trump is an optimist. Now Iran threatens to attack Saudi port of Bamboo on the Red Sea coast. The Houthis have gotten into this. The new Ayatollah has not been seen. I thought this is an AI graphic somebody put up. Thought that was a good graphic of the new Ayatollah sort of digging his fingernails into the earth. And then this other one was, they've sewed up the Hormuz Strait. And that's a problem. But then somebody said, well, I see your AI and I raise you an AI. So here's another one, Strait of Hormuz. And then there's another one where Trump he's taken out Strait of Hormuz and it's called Strait of Trump. And I could see that too. I mean, it's crazy. So the week, Trump's peace deal, grounds for hope or fake news. Here's one. Iran's missiles still wreak havoc despite pounding by U.S. and Israel. The number of missiles fired has dropped dramatically from the first few days, but they still bring them in. And I don't know if you have a Red Alert app. I have Zofar, like shofar, Zofar, Tzofar. It works best on my phone. And you get these alerts. I turned off the automatic alerts because it's going off all the time. But it gives you, leave it on for a day and see what the people in Israel go through on a daily basis. The Israel guys up at Mount Gerizim, they said on their podcast a couple days ago, they've had 91 or 93 trips to the bomb shelter in the last 4 weeks. That's pretty disruptive. And I've tried to interview people in Israel, but it's kind of a mixed bag. I saw people at J&S and, that have professional studios and everything. There was one, 4 times during the podcast, they had one or both of them had to leave to go to the bomb shelter. So I don't know how long it took them to record a half hour, but it's a problem. So the missiles are still coming in. They're big, they're fast, they're cluster munitions. That violates international law. By the way, is that lady, Albanese, that Italian lady who's always against Israel, has she said anything about this with Iran? No, because she's a leftist, evil person who hates Jews and Israel. That drives everything she does. So Tehran Times is not really publishing, but they do publish the first few pages on their X account. So, and you've got to give them credit. They're pretty direct with the way they say things. So here's a front page cover from a couple days ago. Pigs will fly before a Trump deal happens. What you learn when you read the Iranian press like this is they read our stuff. So they read all the people that are against Trump and concerned about the way things are going, and they propagandize that through their population and what they publish. Here is a video of missiles, what's written on the missiles. So a lady I interviewed about a month or so ago now, well, over a month ago, before the war started, Eliana Passatin, who lives up in Shiloh. She was on CBN recently, and she was showing a missile that had landed near her home, and it had really awful stuff in Hebrew written by the Iranians on the missile. And here's this is a little post that somebody put up. The Islamic regime launches missiles at Israel bearing the inscription, "In revenge for all Christ's suffering." I know. It doesn't... When the band of Trump are destroying America, there's no need for our missiles to reach territory. So that's a thing. So here's another one. This is a Turkish newspaper. U.S.-Iran talks hit a brick wall. We have a deal. We don't have a deal. Unable to secure Red Sea shipping. Western powers face a Hormuz quagmire. A little bit more about that in a moment, because if there's one thing you can say about Erdogan of Turkey, and this plays perfectly into end times Bible prophecy, Erdogan is an opportunist. So he sees the problem and he's immediately going after it. This is Times of London this morning. Israel vows no let up as U.S. says war to end in weeks. This one's concerning Israel's rationing interceptors because some of these take many months to produce. There was one video somebody put up of early part of the war, and they said, look at all the Arrow missiles or Iron Dome missiles fired. I think it was David Sling firing missiles. 2% of the entire supply on the planet was fired in that one 20-second video. That's not sustainable over the long term. And so they make these cheap drones and everything, and it's pretty expensive. Now this comes out, this is in the Jerusalem Post this morning. U.S. can only confirm about a third of Iran's missile arsenal is destroyed. Now they may not be able to launch it. Some of it may be trapped underground. But if they open the openings, then they get a launcher, they can start launching those missiles again. This is going to be an ongoing problem unless the regime is completely taken down. We're supposed to put troops in. Ground force, this is Wall Street Journal yesterday. Ground forces may reach 17,000. Have anybody of you heard that number that high? I've heard 5,000. I've heard 2,500, 5,000, 7,000, now maybe 17,000. And so the Iranians are ready for that. This is Tehran Times, the most recent front page. Welcome to hell. And the question is, when you put people on this island and you still have a country that has missiles and drones and that type of thing, you have to shoot them all down or you're going to be losing soldiers. And that's not going to be a very politically viable thing for the Trump administration, I don't think. Yeah. So here's one. This is, I already did the Trump peace deal from the week, but this is from Al Akbar newspaper in Lebanon. And they're talking about Iran to Trump, Karg in exchange for regional energy. So supposedly in this negotiating process, they said, hey, you let us have Karg Island, and so that regional energy can reach people. And do you really believe anything that they say at this point? It's negotiating in the public. This was a good article the other day in the op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. Muslims win if Iran's regime loses. Understand that the Iranian regime of Ayatollah Khomeini was very radical when he took office, when he took control of Iran in the revolution in 1979. But that orientation of Khomeini changed dramatically when Khamenei came into play. He was much more radical, and over time, since 1989, over the last, 37 years, Iranian society, military, and everything has become much more radicalized, much more committed to the radical Shia Islam that they believe in. The word now is that Mujtaba Khamenei, the new Ayatollah, is remarkably worse than his father. That's hard to imagine. They think they can cause the end of the world, bring the Mahdi by causing chaos. Wall Street's upset. Economist has an interesting cover today. Advantage Iran, they say. And then here's the Independent in the UK. Big cost of Trump's war. Energy shock hits a world mired in debt. And boy, that's true. There's a chart there that shows the debt of the world. Debt ratios. Japan's a little over, is over 200%. Then you have the U.S. at about 150%. France, China, Germany, South Korea. Everybody's in a lot of debt. And energy costs are going up. It's not going to be possible to replace the energy in the short term. I do have a former client who's a farmer. I did talk to him, big farm. I trust his judgment. I said, I hear all the prophecy guys, podcasts and stuff saying, oh, no fertilizer, food production's going to drop and everything. So I asked him, I said, it's the start of growing season here in Ohio. Do you have your fertilizer inputs in place? And he goes, yeah, I do. And he would say almost all farmers that he knows have their fertilizer for this year. So probably not an impact this year, although I was told I had a contract with somebody to buy, so many tons of this kind of fertilizer or something, some input that I put on my soil. And they called me up and said, we're not going to ship it. We know we have an agreement, but if you pay us $60 a ton more, then we'll sell it to you. Now, I don't know how many tons he uses, but it's not an insignificant charge, but it's going to be built into the price of food. On the other hand, he said, because other areas of the world are going to have decreasing food production, crops in the U.S., if we have a good growing season, the price of those crops is going to go up. And he said his broker, commodities broker, who he sells his grain to, soybeans or corn or whatever, he said he's more optimistic about farm prices in the U.S. than he's ever been. But if they're high farm prices, then that means more price for food, for meat, because they eat the grain and that type of thing. So it's a big deal. Attacks on infrastructure threaten the world economy. I think you can understand that. Here is a post. I thought it was a good summary. Iran has not ceased, but has reduced its shelling of Qatar since the warning strike on March 19th at the liquefaction facility. The price, according to a Qatari source quoted in the local media, was the transfer of $2.5 billion to Tehran. So just when you think you can rely on the Qataris, they sort of undermine you. And this is a big deal. Southeast Asia, a lot of things have shut down. Factories, Financial Times, the global food crisis unleashed by the war, and I think it's true. Now, I want to move to Syria for just a moment and what's going on in Syria. Because, by the way, have you heard anybody talking about Syria much over the last week? It's all Iran, the Gulf Coast countries, and that type of thing. But there are significant things going on in Syria. This is a blog post from the Ideological Defense Institute, The Vanishing Crosses of Syria. What's happening? In a couple villages in Syria, they've been going in, the Syrian Defense Forces going in and getting rid of the crosses. Big church in Damascus was turned into a military facility, and they removed the crosses. These are radical jihadi Sunni Islamists, like ISIS, like the president al-Shara or al-Sharia, you might want to call him, the president of Syria. Because in their theology, one of the things that helps bring the Mahdi, the Sunnis believe in a Mahdi too. The Shias believe in a Mahdi. Now, they have a little different views about how they bring about the Mahdi, but one of the things that they do is they remove the crosses because they believe Jesus is going to come back when the crosses are removed because it destroys the false teaching about him being crucified and rising from the dead. And so they're taking out the crosses. And here's a picture of some guys riding into a village, to the Christian town of, and you can figure out what the name of that is, following yesterday's pogrom. They're going in, they're killing Christians, they're destroying their businesses and thing. And then this post on the right, Turkey-backed Amshaft mercenaries started threatening the Christian population of Syria. They claim that they are ready to die fighting Christians as it's the way of Islam. Turkey is not only a threat to the Jewish community, but also to Christian communities as well. That is very true. Here's another post. Reports on X from locals and regional outlets confirm that SNA, Syrian National Army Forces, The Turkish-backed Syrian National Army are leading the assault. The targeting of this town, an iconic center of Greek Orthodoxy, once again proves that the jihadist nature of these groups and Ankara's role, that's Erdogan, it's the Turkish government, in destabilizing minorities in Syria. Turkey is clearly orchestrating a broader move in the region. The Hellenic Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Hellenic Armed Forces must remain on high alert. That's the Greek military. I won't go into this. This is a guy, I would recommend you follow him on X, and he has a new Substack that is pretty good, and I cannot remember the name of it. I apologize. Dan Burmawi, he was raised in Islam. I believe he's converted to Christianity. But so he was asked, okay, so what's worse, Sunni Islam or Shia? Now, he posted his opinion, and boy, did he ever get eviscerated. What do you mean Sunni's worse? He said Sunni is worse than Shia. Look at what he says in this. Iran's regime has exported chaos to the entire region. I am not here to sanitize the destruction caused by Shia Islam, but there is no comparison, none, between Sunni jihad and Shia jihad when it comes to the barbarity, monstrosity, and nihilism at their core. That's pretty thing. Sunni jihad is a black hole. It recognizes no moral hierarchy, no ethical filter, no gradation of violence. There is no distinction between soldier and child, between combatant and teacher, between state and street. And everybody says, well, Shia is the same way. Okay, well, fine. Then they're all bad, right? That's kind of the point. He's just saying if I had to, I think I could deal with them. And then Dr. Eli David, pretty popular X account. The regime's president, Pezeshkian, to the IRGC commander, if he's still living, if either one of them is still living, if a ceasefire is not established, Iran's economy will completely collapse within 3 weeks. Now, I can tell you, President Trump hears that and says, we just got to hang in there a little while longer and everything will be okay. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Navy prepares ship to clear Hormuz mines. It doesn't take much to lay mines. You lay mines, shipping shuts down. I thought this short clip of a United Arab Emirates minister on Bret Baier's program the other night was one of the best arguments that I saw, very succinct, and I wish she was in charge of more. I think it was very well stated.
First of all, let's just paint the picture as you.
Well, I'm not getting any sound, guys. Guys, no sound. Oh, that's why. How did my volume get all turned all the way down? You got what? Okay, hang on a second. Okay, let's try this again.
First of all, let's just paint the picture as you see it from the UAE, how things are going, what it looks like from your end of the world.
Well, first of all,
Are we not getting the
what happened
sound?
in the Gulf clearly doesn't stay in the Gulf. So Iran's attack on Gulf allies of the United States and Jordan is an attack on the entire world and the world economy, including its closure.
Are you getting a lot of spiking or what?
Let's not forget that
It's like chopped up out here.
gas goes through the Straits of
Huh?
Hormuz. 30% of its fertilizers for food production and harvest goes.
Let's see. Okay, let me try this again. Apologize. Technical difficulties.
First of all, let's just paint the picture as you see it from the UAE, how things are going, what it looks like from your end of the world.
Well, first of all, Brett, what happens in the Gulf clearly doesn't stay in the Gulf. So Iran's attack on Gulf allies of the United States and Jordan is an attack on the entire world and the world economy, including its closure of the Straits of Hormuz. Let's not forget that a fifth of the world's oil and gas goes through the Straits of Hormuz. 30% of its fertilizers for food production and harvest goes through the Straits of Hormuz. Almost every product known to every global supply chain coming from the Gulf goes through the Straits of Hormuz. So effectively, Iran is trying to give the global economy a heart attack. We should not allow Iran, a state sponsor of terrorism, to set the global price for food and gas.
And that's why it's a world problem. And anybody who says the United States has no interest over there is wrong, wrong, wrong. Because Iran was going to do this at some point. And I'm grateful that Trump has tried to bring it to a head. What you can argue about whether they're going about it the right way or not. But what's happening, though, is Shia is under duress, Shia Islam. The concern is Sunni Islam. Here's Ruth Wasserman Land on I-24 the other day talking about that issue.
My question for you would be whether or not there's a world in which we could see the Gulf becoming closer to the state of Israel, which obviously goes abjectly against the Islamic Republic's plans here.
I think the UAE has positioned itself in the interest of anti-extremism very, very clearly and has taken a kind of a leadership role in combating anti-extremism, combating extremism, my apologies, and terrorism and extremism in the Islamic sense. And I think that that state of leadership is different from the other Arab countries. We had not seen such leadership from Saudi Arabia. We had not seen such leadership from other countries, but we do see a potential to coalition with like-minded countries in the day after. Mm-hmm. Do I foresee that this will happen? Unfortunately not, because we see, as I have said before, a coalition in the making of Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey. So whilst we are cleaning the pathway of Shiite extremism in the region and worldwide, we will see a resurgence of Muslim Brotherhood and Sunni extremist Islam. And then it would be a choice by those countries which coalition to belong to. Right. And I'm a little bit less optimistic about the others, not Bahrain and particularly the UAE, with which I am optimistic.
So what she's saying is, so how are the Gulf Coast countries going to go? Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Oman, are they going to go with sort of their own coalition that unites with Israel, sort of Abraham Accords? Or are they going to join in with Syria, Turkey, really Turkey, in sort of this extreme form, Muslim Brotherhood form? And Egypt is going to join in with Turkey. There's just no doubt. And Egypt's in a total mess right now economically. So she's pretty level-headed, and she just says, I'm optimistic about Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, but not Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is making some demands. I may have something on that in a moment. I don't remember if I put it in my slides or not. But here's an article. This comes from the Ankara Institute of Russian Studies. I didn't know there was such a thing, but they put up a pretty good post. Ankara and Damascus are working on an alternate route via Syria and Turkey. So there's a big thing. We talked about it on the roundtable IMEC, India, Middle East, European corridor. How do we get goods from Asia, where they're produced, to Europe? And so there's this question, how do we do this? So one route was IMEC. That was introduced in 2020. at the G20, 2023, just shortly before October 7th. Netanyahu talked about it at the UN in September of 2023, 2 weeks before the attack on October 7th. Mohammed bin Salman gave interviews. This is great. We all want this shipping corridor and that type of thing. But now what happens? Well, now are any of these shipping corridors viable? Because Iran's got drones. It's asymmetrical warfare, and if you can attack a ship, you can attack a pipeline, you can attack a railroad car. It's the same principle, and so it's really caused a mess. So they shut down the Suez Canal, and now this morning the Houthis are shooting at ships in the Red Sea to shut that down. I had a graphic someplace. Well, in my mind, I had put in this beautiful graphic, and it showed ships stuck in the Strait of Hormuz and ships going through the Red Sea and Suez Canal both ways. But now that's going to be shut down. What do we do? And that's going to cause a lot of problems, fertilizer shortages, gas, oil, and it will have a cascade effect through the world economy. And I don't think anybody's going to be immune from it. Some countries less so. If you have the United States seems to have its own oil supply in place. We have fertilizer, but then can we make it? Even if we have the gas and everything, it's very, very complex and interconnected. But from this one report, due to the uncertainty surrounding the end of the Iran war and the growing disruption in energy and supply chains, regional actors are turning towards reshaping their trade routes. Turkey and Syria, led by Ahmed al-Shara, are working to establish a rival corridor that could potentially bypass Israel and connect the Gulf to Europe. The war has reinforced the importance of IMEC, originally planned to pass through India, Gulf countries, Jordan, Israel, and Europe, and tied to Israel-Saudi Arabian normalization. Now, Ankara and Damascus are working on an alternate route via Syria and Turkey. The plans include a high-speed rail line extending from Saudi Arabia through Jordan to Syria. By the way, none of this stuff gets built overnight, right? It doesn't drop out of the sky. And pipelines to Syrian ports. Saudi Arabia has also launched a new land logistics route extending from its eastern ports through Jordan to its northern neighbors, not Israel. If Israel is left out of the equation, the losses could reach billions of dollars to Israel, which needs the money. Gideon Bromberg from Echo Peace says that Saudi Arabia now sees IMAC as vital, but could opt for transit routes through Haifa, Syria, Turkey, or Egypt, and would only use Haifa if tied to a broader political agreement that also includes the Palestinians. Now that has a lot of end-time Bible prophecy stuff packed up on that ex-post. And so here's my idea of Erdogan's controlling al-Shara. I think that's clear. This is what the new route would look like. That's IMEC, but it's IMEC modified. It may not go through Haifa. It may go through Syria into Turkey. Turkey has a big pipeline network. So, and now this is based on a report out of Iranian newspaper or Iranian news site. Iran plots infrastructure warfare against what? U.S. tech giants. And they're proposing we're going to take out the data centers. And there's data centers all over the Gulf now. Our government's been pushing this through a thing called Pax Silica. Why is everything, so the peace of silicon, I guess, everything is peace and trade and that type of thing. It's very interesting. Financial Times, that's the Strait of Hormuz. Oh, they killed the Navy chief. There's the Strait of Hormuz. The New York Times has really good graphics about how do you open it? Is it that easy? And you've got a problem. What if they're shooting drones and stuff? You got to shut off the drones. You don't want your troops sitting there. They're sitting ducks. Iran plots a route to profit from Hormuz. So Iran says, They're business people, right? Hey, we can make you a deal. We'll give you safe passage. Like, hey, Qatar, pay us $2.5 billion and you can restart your gas liquefaction plant. It seems, what did I say a long time ago? Seth Frantzman said this recently too. If you want to understand the way the Iranians operate, go watch The Godfather. Protection money, mob rule, and that type of thing. Now, we're sort of responding. We're sort of trying to do like Michael Corleone did. He took out all the other family leadership in one fell swoop. So it's a two-way street. So the Iranians have thought a lot about how to utilize geography to their benefit. The weapons may be relatively small, but that allows the Iranians to hide them in cliffs, caves, and tunnels, and then deploy them at close range along the coastline. And you're close, they can get to you. Uh-oh, that's a problem. So this is a graphic that shows that. The first step toward opening the strait by military force would involve trying to strip away Iran's ability to attack ships. Since the war began at the end of February, as many as 17 vessels have been struck, according to a maritime data firm. Boy. Russia says, hey, here's a lesson for Iran. And so now you got the Ukrainians coming down to show the Gulf countries how to take care of drones. But now the Houthis are sort of messing with the Red Sea entrance. They shot stuff this morning, a missile towards Israel. There were warnings, first time in this war. I don't know. I would just say if I described it as a mess, I would be very much understating what's going on. Here's a report. Oh, the Kurds are upset too, and they're trying to take advantage of it. That upsets Turkey. The Kurds are moving into Syria. The Iraqis are moving into the Kurdish areas. Turkey wants to go into the Kurdish areas. We go back to the graphic that I found at the beginning. I think this one is pretty good. This is kind of what the Middle East and Russia, Ukraine looks like today. It's a mess. Okay, so I've got two things I want to show you, both of which you will all be upset with. I will skip the one. I will talk about it because I'm sure he is your favorite person in the world. And it's this guy, Jared Kushner. And he was at the FII Institute, Financial Future Investment Initiative Institute in Miami, where he happens to live on a private island in the area. And this is an institute run by Saudi Arabia, one of the major gatherings of investors and thinkers in the world, along with World Economic Forum, World Government Summit, and the one in St. Petersburg, Russia. And so he talked about the path to diplomacy and peace and prosperity. And what he was talking about was, he said, when we negotiated with the Iranians, we found that they weren't serious. And they kept changing the deal. And it bothered Witkoff and I. And I'm sort of like, dude, we all knew that was going to happen. Why didn't you call some of us up and ask? We could have saved you the angst. But now what he's talking about, I'm going to play a little bit of this clip. And the question is, what's going on? Has anybody heard anything about Gaza? Well, Kushner talked about Gaza, and you need to listen to just a little bit of this.
You know, the other side of it as well is now that the war has stopped and we've, a lot of people thought it wouldn't hold. It was a very delicate ceasefire in the beginning. You know, I thought I would get the deal done and then, I'd go back to my life. But then Steve and I were both realizing, oh my God, there's a lot to do to keep this thing held together. You know, there's so much hatred and emotion and distrust when you're ending a war that you can't just, like a light switch, turn it on and off. So we then started focusing on how do we deal with the massive humanitarian issue that was occurring in Gaza. You had 2 million people there. We've been able to work with the United Nations. I give Tom Fletcher a lot of credit. We've put in more humanitarian aid into a war zone that I think has ever been done in history. So now there's a lot of aid in there. And we've started the rebuilding process. I know Yakir Gabay is here, who's a great friend of mine, and he's basically volunteered all of his time away from his businesses to try and help us come up with a plan to do this. Tony Blair's been great. So, we really have brought a lot of great entrepreneurs and thinkers in, and I think we're making a lot of progress. And we're currently, I think it's about 4 months since the war was stopped, and I think nobody thought it would last, this long. And we're kind of at the final stages of the negotiations with Hamas on the demilitarization, where they basically agreed in principle to follow through. That was the agreement we did. Now their concerns are mostly about, well, if we turn over our weapons and we do this, who are we turning them over to? And we're building a Palestinian police force. Right now we had over, I think about 200,000 applicants for it, and I think over like 70,000 that passed our vet. So we're going to build a great Palestinian police force, and so we have to work it through. And I think that we appointed a new government in Gaza, which also was a very interesting experience. All again businessmen who are risking their lives to go in and do public service in that area. And our goal is just to really help.
Okay, enough. Did you hear what he said? We're building a giant police force in Gaza. 70,000 people. What's the number in the IDF? Maybe 100,000? What? In Gaza? And Hamas, yeah, they've agreed. They haven't agreed to do anything, Mr. Kushner. They're not laying down their weapons. They're not demilitarizing. They're strengthening themselves again. So whatever was done till now, probably going to have to be redone. They've had a number of months now of free reign to reconstitute themselves. Do you think that you think they're laying down their arms? Who believes that? I mean, listen, I guess when you live in a luxurious beachfront community, it's all luxurious beachfront community to you. And his affinity partners, they started with like $1 billion from UAE and $1 billion from Saudi Arabia, is now up to he's managing like $6 billion for them, taking fees off of it. This does not sit well with me. So I'm going to do a mercy gift to all of you. I'm not going to play.
If you were the commander-in-chief of the United States.
Carlson, he interviewed this Chinese guy, and I'll just sort of give you the short summary. The Chinese guy, I don't know who this guy is. He's a propaganda operation. He's talking about our eschatology and we're the problem and we're going to bring about the end times. No, dude, that's the Iranians. That's the Sunnis. We're not like that. Stop lying about us. Call us up and talk to us. We'll set you straight. But he's not interested because he's a propaganda operative. And who has him on? I don't even know what his credentials are. Of course, Tucker has him on. Tucker has on some guy who everybody in Israel says is a completely fringe wacko. And he says, oh, this guy, look at what he says about Israel. And he's right. This Tucker is a complete, total propaganda operation. And the fact that I have people who've been on my friends list for a long time think he's okay, it's shocking. I had some guy comment recently on the YouTube channel in his last comment, before he was blocked, said, you don't understand Tucker. I've done hundreds of hours of research and you're just wrong. You just have a strong opinion. But wait a minute. You just gave me a strong opinion about my strong opinion. Okay, thanks. See ya. It's shocking to me. So Rabbi Walicki from Israel 365 has a great article in today's Jerusalem Post, Pishak Walicki, and I'm trying to get an interview with him, When Theology Collides with Reality. And it's a very good analysis of what's going on, the anti-Semitism that's rampant all over the world. Did you see this in Israel? Ambulance attack, work of Iran, says an Israeli minister. They destroyed Jewish private ambulances that were very well respected. They just burned like 4 of them in London, around London. And the Wall Street Journal yesterday, Jews begin to wonder, is anywhere safe? So I have friends. They've been in the United States. They couldn't get home. They finally got home, and they were thrilled to death to get back to Israel where the rockets and missiles are falling. Because they believe in what's going on there, and that's part of the point. Okay, that's enough. So lots of things going on. I hope you can appreciate that. Hopefully this made some sense this morning. We'll be paying attention. I will. Trigger warning. Sometime going to play that thing of Tucker. Oh, let me give you the summary. Tucker said, the guy says, we need a multipolar world. We need a world to be run by Russia and China. And the United States lessened. And Tucker, he was saying on another interview, China needs to be in charge. Who do you think he's working for? Why is J.D. Vance still hanging around? I don't understand why Vance is hanging around with him. J.D., get your mind straight or leave, okay? I don't think he's going to win. But then the guy said, well, we need a multipolar world, a new globalization. And Tucker said, yeah, but the only country that stands in the way of that is Israel. So little teeny tiny Israel, what is this? This is an anti-Semitic trope. The Jews control everything. That's Tucker. Don't tell me that he's not saying that. He is. And if you don't see that, then I don't know. You got to educate yourself. This is a terrible thing that's going on. So anyway, lots going on. We didn't even talk about Russia, Ukraine, but someday I'm going to play a clip of Tucker, and I may not warn you in advance, so just be aware of that. So let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for the blessing that you gave us to lay out information in the prophets like Ezekiel and Daniel so we can begin to make sense of what's going on in the world today. And Lord, please remind us constantly that what we see going on is a spiritual battle. And just pray that you'll give us wisdom to understand that, share that wisdom with others, and also share the gospel of Jesus Christ with them. Pray that you'll bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.